What up, Marsh Pod? We're recording this. It is Sunday, February 4th. We got a deep dive on Rocky Mountain. We got a deep dive on Queen City Kings. But first, we're going to start with the All-Star Game. The reserves were announced, 12 teams, 12 players per team, and the immediate, as is annual tradition this time of year, is to determine who and who was not snubbed. We're not going to dive into, well, now you got to name who shouldn't be in there. I think that there's always going to be a player or players that are going to be widely considered, whether by the fan base of the national media or by fans in general, that they should have been in there. I don't care. That's part of this life. All-Star games are meant to be important, and people are going to miss them. There's going to be, at the end, that very last little bit, you're going to have people that just simply don't get in because they don't get enough votes. And we can complain and we can talk about it, but guess what? If majority of people didn't put Trae Young in there or anyone, Rudy Gobert in there, it's because they don't think he's good enough. The player vote is always chaos. You look at Thanasis Antetokounmpo getting 3 votes, Gorgui Dieng getting 15. It's absolutely, I don't think it's stupid that the players have a vote, but it's always just been, players are going to vote for players. We did a deep dive already on that last season with Japheth Towns, so we're not going to rehash that. But the reaction has been now, well, we need to expand this. The NBA roster is 15 players. The All-Star Game should be 15 players on the roster. No, it shouldn't. No, it shouldn't. If you look at any NBA roster, the 14th and 15th dudes, they don't get in. They don't do anything. I mean, they're not playing unless there's so many injuries or it's such a blowout that you have to play them. Look at Golden State. This is where I said we're recording this on Sunday. Last night they lost to Atlanta Hawks in overtime, and they had to close with Lester Quinones on the floor. Why? Because they had so many injuries to guys in their rotation that Lester Quinones on a two-way has to come in and give minutes. That's when the 14th, the 15th guys play. Other than that, it's just not happening. We get a little guest star here, Cap Moody, rolling in. We're staying locked in, though. We're staying locked in. That's when these guys get in. So to sit here and say, well, the NBA roster is 15, we should expand it. Well, we should expand it if we're not going to play 14 and 15. If you want this to be authentic to the league, those guys get to come in, but we only suit up 13, so they get to play in street clothes. Ben Simmons, this is the perfect time for Ben Simmons to get in. He can dress nicely. Maybe not nicely, but he can dress some sort of way, show up, and not even get into the basketball game. Dream come true for him. But if that's how we wanted to go about it, then that's how it's supposed to be. 13 guys are dressing. I think if we expand this to 13 roster spots, which when the league expands to eventually it'll likely expand to 32 teams. You're looking at probably Las Vegas and Seattle. We'll end up with basketball teams within the next 2 to 5 years. Then we can expand the number of all-star spots. But until then, this is just better. Let's have some controversy. Let's figure out who should and should not be involved. All right, shift gears. SimWorld Prep, Queen City Kings. They've won 5 straight basketball games. They have suddenly rocketed up their divisional standings or their regional standings, and they're starting to make some noise. Let's look at it. Their last 5 games, they have beaten H-Town, Showtime, Beyond the Arch, Africa, and South America. Showtime is currently the only one of those 5 teams that's at 500, and they are only at 500 because they just won, snapping their extended losing streak. Their other wins are against Yacht Club and Middle East, with Yacht Club at the time was opening night, so below 500, but they only recently became above 500 because of a 2-game winning streak. Meanwhile, their losses, Lone Star, Southeast, Heartland, Indy, Oceania, Best Coast, all of those teams are at or well above 500. So the point, yeah, they've won some games, but it hasn't really been against the league's best teams. But don't worry, that's not where we stop this conversation. That wouldn't be a deep dive, that'd be a shallow dive. We're going a little bit deeper. So what's been going right? Marco Jacobs has been great all season. So to say Marco Jacobs now is the number 1 guy doesn't really look at his full body of work. He's been doing basically what he's been doing in the last 5 games all season long. Meanwhile, the arrival of Taj Journey has come at the absolute best time. He's had 9 or more assists in the last 3 games, 9 or more points in the last 3 games, 4 more assists, including 10 in the last 3 games. He's been on the roster for 4 straight. The challenge for Queen City Kings was not necessarily that they needed a number one guy. Marco Jacobs has been that. It's that their rotations were iffy and that the ball was in poor hands before. Journey has taken over the major playmaking duties, which has in turn unlocked Sky Durant. If you look at him over the pre-winning streak games, that's 8 games, he had 4 games, Sky Durant, of 40% field goal shooting or less. In the last 5 games, he's been at or above 40%, with 4 of them being well above 40% at 41.7% shooting. Skinny is trusting him more. He's trusting Sky Durant because he's trusting Taz Journey to be more impactful. We saw minimal minutes for a little 3-game stretch out of Sky Durant in late December, early January, and he's been better because he doesn't have to be the primary guy quite as much. Now, his shots portfolio is relatively consistent, but he's just being in better situations, partially because Taz Journey has allowed them to do just that. Meanwhile, their bench is better. DeMontre Johnson, who's currently off the team, was a negative plus-minus in 6 of the 9 games he played before leaving the team on January 13. That was the start of their winning streak against South America. He played in that game, was a minus, no longer on the roster. That's made Marco Jacobs better. He was a negative in those first 8 games, in 5 of them in the plus-minus. In the last 5, he's been positive in all of them. Meanwhile, Daquan Holton, who was put in the right spots after Skinny experimented him in big minutes in the middle of the season, again, pre-winning streak. So, is the list of teams they've beaten great? No. But the moves on the rotation by Skinny have made this team more cohesive. Plus, the arrival of a stabilizing point guard, something that we all thought Renzo Bryant was meant to be before his departure, has made this team better. All right, let's head out west. Rocky Mountain, they have been tumbling. They've lost 8 of their last 9. Of those 8, though, 5 of them are against teams with 8 or more wins. They have played maybe the toughest stretch that any team has or is going to play during this season. It has been a buzzsaw with their lone win coming against division leader Gulf Coast. This team has talent. Justin Bell is still a hyper-efficient scorer, albeit on lower volume than you may like or may see from some of these guys that are more your traditional top 5 scorers in the league. Dink Pate has been up and down after his scorching start, but still kind of trust him to be able to take 15 shots and score efficiently. Lucas Banks is a great player. The problem and the puzzling part is that this team is so efficient on offense, yet they're still getting blasted. Lucas Banks is a minus in the last 4 games that he's played, that Rocky Mountain has played, despite having scoring nights of 18, 9, 17, and 18. Justin Bell has been a negative in their last 7 games. Dink Paint has been a positive in the plus-minus just 4 times all season. Their defense is atrocious. They allow the most points, the highest field goal percentage, and the highest three-point percentage of any team in the league. Their field goal percentage at 53 and their three-point at 45 are both the highest marks in the league if that was an offense. So essentially, when teams play against Rocky Mountain, they transform into the best offense in the league. The onus falls to Josh Robinson to do something. Partially, this roster was built with just a single player that looks like they want to play any sort of defense or is at all capable of playing defense. That's Rashad Rockford. Yet he gets just 7.3 minutes per game, the fewest on the team. They essentially went all in on offensive pieces with the hope that we're going to blitz you. And they do it to 73 points per game, a high mark in this league. But they at the same time completely forgot that they have to stop teams from blitzing them, and they haven't done that. So what do they need to do? They need to figure out some type of rotation, just like Skinny Washington did in Queen City Kings that's turned their season around, that makes them figure out how to play defense and stop allowing every single opponent, regardless of who they are. Yes, that list of teams that we named, those 8 of 9 games, have been a brutal stretch. But you've got to find some way to stop the bleeding, whether that's a rotational change, whether that's reevaluating this roster, which obviously is not necessarily something they can do on a whim. They bring in Benjamin Alexander, though doesn't necessarily profile as a great defender, though there certainly is the opportunity to do so. But unless they do, and until they do, this slide in Rocky Mountain is likely to continue. All right, we'll catch you next Monday. Keep you in the loop on some Marsh mobiles, and we'll probably react to the Super Bowl 1 week from now.